My family disowned me years ago over false allegations from my brother's girlfriend. Now that the truth came out, they're trying to come back into my life, unaware of the new life and family I've built without them. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. All right, Reddit. This story is going to mess with your head. I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that makes you question everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. This happened about 8 years ago, but I'm finally ready to put it all out there because honestly, keeping this to myself has been eating me alive. So picture this. I, 32 male, was living at home while finishing my engineering degree and working part-time at a local garage. I was 24 years old back then. My younger brother Kai was 22, and he'd been dating this girl Anita for about a year and a half. She was one of those girls who seemed perfect on paper. Pretty, smart, came from a good family. My parents absolutely loved her, always talking about how lucky Kai was and how she was perfect daughter-in-law material. I never really liked her though. Something about her always felt fake to me. She'd be all sweet and innocent around my parents, but I caught her being pretty nasty to service workers when she thought nobody was looking. Plus, she had this way of making these little comments about me that sounded like jokes, but weren't really jokes, you know? Like she'd say stuff like, "Oh, still living at home? When are you going to get your life together like Kai?" With this smile that didn't reach her eyes. Kai was completely whipped. This dude would cancel plans with friends, skip family events, basically reorganize his entire life around whatever Anita wanted. It was painful to watch, but he was my brother, and I figured he'd eventually figure it out on his own. The day everything went to hell started normal enough. I was supposed to help Kai move some furniture from his apartment to his new place. We'd planned to meet there around 3 p.m. to get started, but around 1:30 he texted me asking if I could head over early because his car was making weird noises and he needed to stop by the shop to get it looked at. He said he might be an hour late, but that Anita would be there to let me in and we could start packing some of the smaller stuff. No big deal, right? I figured I'd grab some coffee on the way and maybe get a head start on boxing up his books or whatever. Kai had given me his spare key months ago when he first moved in, so I didn't think twice about it. I got to his apartment building around 1:45 and took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet. Most people were probably at work on a Tuesday afternoon. I walked up to Kai's door and was about to knock when I heard voices inside. Figured Anita was maybe on the phone or watching TV. I used my key to unlock the door and stepped inside, calling out, "Hey, it's me," so I wouldn't startle her. That's when I saw them. Anita was pressed up against the wall in Kai's living room, with Alan's hands all over her. They were making out like teenagers, completely lost in each other. Alan, my brother's friend since college, the guy who'd been to every birthday party and family barbecue for the past 3 years. "What the hell?" I shouted. They broke apart instantly. Anita's face went from passion to pure panic in about half a second. Alan spun around and went white as a sheet when he saw me standing there. For a moment, nobody said anything. I was furious. "Are you kidding me right now?" I said, looking back and forth between them. "In my brother's own apartment?" For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Anita started crying. She pushed Alan away and started backing toward the corner of the room, sobbing and saying, "Please don't tell him," over and over. Alan stepped between us with this weird protective stance. "Dude, you need to leave," he said. "Just go." Like I was the one who didn't belong there. Kai is my brother. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Alan?" That's when Anita really started freaking out. She was hyperventilating, saying things like, "He's going to tell everyone, and Kai will never forgive me." I tried to calm her down, but she just kept getting more hysterical, and Alan kept telling me to leave. Finally, I said screw it and walked out. I figured I'd call Kai and let him handle it. I drove home thinking about how I was going to break this news to my brother. It was going to destroy him, but he needed to know. The guy deserved better than being played for a fool by someone he trusted. But near the evening, my phone started blowing up with calls from Kai. When I answered, he was screaming at me. "What the hell did you do to Anita?" The conversation with Kai was like something out of a nightmare. He was so angry I could barely understand what he was saying at first. Apparently, Anita had called him immediately after I left, crying and telling him that I had attacked her at his place. Her story was that she was alone when I had shown up, and while helping with the furniture, I forced myself on her. Alan was backing up her story, claiming he walked into us and he tried to stop me, but I was too strong, and that I had threatened both of them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Kai, that's completely insane. I caught them making out. She's cheating on you with Alan. Shut up! You're a liar, he said. Anita would never cheat on me. She loves me. You're just jealous because you can't get a girl like her. The jealousy angle hit me hard because it was so ridiculous. I'd never been jealous of Kai's relationship. If anything, I'd felt bad for him because I could see how manipulative she was. I tried to explain what I had actually seen, but Kai wasn't having it. He said Anita was talking to the police. The police. I felt like I was in some alternate reality where nothing made sense. Kai, please, you have to listen to me. I'm your brother. Why would I lie about this? Because you've always hated her, he said. You've never been able to stand seeing me happy. Well, congratulations. You might have just destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. He hung up on me. I sat there, hands shaking, trying to figure out what just happened. 20 minutes ago, I was worried about telling my brother his girlfriend was cheating. Now apparently I was a predator. I drove to my parents' house, went inside and found them in the kitchen. They already knew. Kai had called them first, and they were both sitting there looking at me like I was a stranger. My mom was crying, and my dad was just staring at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Is it true? My dad asked. Is what true? That I caught Anita cheating and she's lying about it to cover her tracks? Yeah, that's true. My mom gasped like I had just confessed to murder. How could you do this to your brother? To that sweet girl? I tried to explain what really happened, but they weren't listening any better than Kai had. They had already decided I was guilty. They'd rather believe their son was capable of assault than admit their perfect future daughter-in-law was a cheater. The next few hours were surreal. Kai came home with Anita. She was playing the victim perfectly, crying whenever anyone looked at her, flinching when I entered the room. She'd clearly studied how trauma victims behave and was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. Kai wouldn't even look at me. When I tried to talk to him, he told me to stay away from his girlfriend. My own brother was treating me like a predator in our own house. The worst part was watching my parents comfort Anita. My mom was making her tea and telling her how brave she was. My dad was patting Kai on the back and telling him what a good man he was for standing by his woman. Meanwhile, I was sitting right there, their actual son, and they were treating me like a monster. Nobody was asking me for my side of the story. Nobody seemed to care that their son and brother might be innocent. They had already made up their minds. That night, Kai cornered me in the hallway outside my room. He was different than I'd ever seen him, angry in a way that was almost scary. If you ever go near Anita again, I will beat the hell out of you myself, he said. The little brother I taught to throw a football was talking to me like I was his worst enemy. Kai, she's lying. I swear to God, she's lying. I caught her cheating and she's covering it up. He grabbed me by the shirt and slammed me against the wall. My little brother was looking at me like he wanted to kill me. You're going to keep lying even now? He said. Even after what you did to her? You're sick, man. You're really sick. I pushed him off me. Fine, don't believe me. But when you find out the truth, don't come crying to me. The only truth is that my brother is a monster, he said, and I'm never going to forgive you for this. 2 days later, the police showed up at our house with a warrant for my arrest. I knew it was coming. Anita had filed a formal complaint, and Alan was corroborating her story. But actually being handcuffed in front of my neighbors was humiliating beyond words. The detective handling my case was this older guy who clearly thought I was guilty from the start. During the interrogation, he kept asking me things like, "Did you plan this, or was it a crime of passion?" Like he was just trying to get me to confess to something I didn't do. He had this tired, seen-it-all attitude that told me he'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't buying mine. I told him the truth, that I had caught Anita cheating and she was lying to cover it up. But he said that's what guys like me always say. Apparently, claiming the victim was lying was such a common defense that it actually made me look more guilty. My parents kept asking me if I was sure that's what happened, like maybe I was confused or afraid to tell the truth. The only person who believed me was my friend Jensen, who said he'd known Anita was sketchy from day one. The investigation dragged on for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of my life just suspended while the police interviewed witnesses and collected evidence. The house was like a war zone. Kai and Anita were there constantly, and she was milking the victim role for everything it was worth. She'd have panic attacks whenever I was in the room and would cry to my parents about how traumatized she was. The performance never stopped, even when she thought no one was watching. Kai was her loyal guard dog through all of it. He'd sit with her during her episodes and glare at me like I was some kind of animal that needed to be contained. My parents were completely buying into it too. They'd comfort Anita and tell her how sorry they were that their son had done this to her. I felt like a ghost haunting my own house. The worst part was that nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. Whenever I tried to explain what really happened, they'd shut me down and say I was re-traumatizing the victim. I was guilty until proven innocent, and maybe not even then. My college suspended me pending the outcome of the investigation. My job fired me for conduct unbecoming. Friends stopped calling and returning texts. Word got around our small town pretty quickly, and I couldn't go anywhere without people staring and whispering. Jensen was the only one who stuck by me. He'd come over and hang out, which was awkward because Qley would leave the room whenever Jensen showed up. Jensen kept saying he knew I was innocent and that the truth would come out eventually. Sometimes I wondered if he was just being loyal or if he actually believed me, but his support was the only thing keeping me sane. After about a month, the detective called me in for another interview. He said they had been investigating Alan's story and found some inconsistencies. Apparently, Alan had changed his story twice about what exactly he had seen, and his timeline didn't match up with Anita's. When you're lying, it's hard to keep all the details straight, especially under police scrutiny. The detective also told me they had requested Anita's phone records and found some interesting text messages. He wouldn't tell me what they said, but his attitude toward me had definitely changed. He was asking different questions, like whether I had any proof of the affair I claimed to have discovered. Now for my absolute shitty luck, there were no security cameras around Qley's place. I had no proof except for what I saw with my own eyes, which was apparently not enough. 2 weeks later, the charges were dropped. The detective called to tell me that they had found no evidence to support Anita's claims, and several pieces of evidence that contradicted her story. He said they wouldn't be pursuing the case further. The relief I felt was overwhelming, but it was mixed with anger that it had taken 6 weeks to reach the obvious conclusion. You'd think that would be the end of it, but you'd be wrong. My parents' reaction to the charges being dropped was basically, well, just because they can't prove it doesn't mean it didn't happen. They said they were disappointed in the justice system and that they knew what they believed. It was like they were more invested in being right than in their son being innocent. Qley was even worse. He said dropping the charges didn't prove anything. The mental gymnastics were incredible. Rather than admit they'd been wrong, they doubled down on their belief that I was guilty. But the worst part was that they all stayed loyal to Anita. Even after the charges were dropped, even after it was clear her story didn't hold up, my family chose to believe her over me. She was still coming to family dinners. Qley was still treating her like his princess. My parents were still treating her like their future daughter-in-law. I was the one who was unwelcome in my own house. My parents said I could stay until I figured things out, but it was clear they wanted me gone. Qley made it obvious that he couldn't stand being in the same room as me. The house that had been my home for 24 years suddenly felt hostile and foreign. The final straw came about 2 weeks after the charges were dropped. I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen about how they were concerned about having me around and how they needed to think about Anita's comfort. They were literally choosing my brother's lying girlfriend over their own son. The conversation I overheard was brutal. They were discussing whether to ask me to move out permanently because my presence was upsetting to Anita. That night, I packed everything I owned into my car. I left a note saying I was leaving town and not to look for me. I drove straight to Jensen's place and told him I was done. Done with my family. Done with that town. Done with trying to prove my innocence to people who had already decided I was guilty. Jensen tried to talk me out of it, said I should stay and fight, but I was finished fighting. Sometimes you have to know when to walk away, even when walking away means losing everything you thought mattered. I knew even if I fought back, the damage was already done, and I had no evidence. I knew I had no place with my family anymore. I headed north with no real plan except to get as far away as possible. Ended up in Montreal because it was the first major city I hit after crossing the border, and honestly, the distance felt right. I figured if I was going to disappear, I might as well do it properly. The French signs and different money made it feel like a completely different world, which was exactly what I needed. The first few months were rough as hell. I was living in this tiny studio apartment in a sketchy part of town, working construction jobs that paid cash under the table. My French was garbage, so I mostly worked with other English speakers who were just as desperate for work as I was. The construction crew became like a temporary family. Guys who didn't ask questions about your past and judged you only on whether you could swing a hammer and show up on time. The hardest part was the isolation. For the first time in my life, I didn't have anyone. No family, no childhood friends, no connections at all. Just me in a foreign country, trying to figure out how to rebuild my entire existence from scratch. Some nights I'd sit in that tiny apartment eating ramen and wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The work was brutal, but therapeutic. There's something about building things with your hands that helps clear your head when everything else is falling apart. I specialized in framing and drywall, work that required focus and precision. The physical exhaustion helped me sleep, and the satisfaction of seeing a building come together piece by piece gave me something to be proud of when everything else felt hopeless. I changed my name legally after about 6 months. It cost me almost everything I had saved, but I needed to shed that old identity completely. Every time I saw my old name on documents, it reminded me of everything that had happened. The new name felt like putting on clean clothes after being covered in mud. Jensen stayed in touch, which probably saved my sanity. He'd call every couple of weeks to check in and eventually started visiting me a few times a year. It was good to have one person from my old life who still believed in me. He'd update me on what was happening back home, though most of it I didn't want to hear. Hearing about my family's life continuing without me was like picking at a scab that wouldn't heal. Apparently, Kai and Anita got more serious after I left. He proposed to her with some elaborate setup in the park where they'd had their first date. My parents were thrilled about it, constantly talking about wedding plans and grandchildren. Kai had gotten a promotion at his job, and they'd settled into domestic life together. From the outside, it looked like the perfect happy ending, except for the son and brother they'd thrown away to make it happen. Jensen never said it directly, but I could tell he thought my family was messed up for choosing Anita over me. He'd make comments about how weird it was that they never asked about me, or seemed concerned about where I'd gone. But he was loyal to me, not them, so he kept those observations to himself mostly. He did mention that some of our mutual friends had started asking questions about my disappearance, but Kai and my parents had just said I'd moved away for work. After about a year, I started getting my life together for real. I enrolled in a college program to finish my engineering degree, using my new identity and Canadian residency status. The transition back to academic life was jarring after months of physical labor, but it felt good to be using my brain again. Made a few friends, nothing deep, but people to grab a drink with or watch hockey games. The work situation improved too. I landed a job with a construction company that specialized in commercial buildings. The pay was decent, and the work was satisfying. I started dating again around year 2, though trust was still a major issue. But slowly, gradually, I learned to open up, started having a routine, a decent apartment, a job I didn't hate, and a few people who knew me as just a regular guy helped restore my confidence. The real breakthrough came in year 3 when I met April at a coffee shop near campus. She was a nursing student, originally from Vancouver, and we hit it off immediately. She was patient with my trust issues, never pushed when I was obviously uncomfortable. We took things incredibly slow. I told her I had a complicated past, but didn't go into details. She didn't push for information, which made me trust her even more. By the time I was ready to tell her the whole story, we'd been together for almost a year, and she already knew me well enough to know I wasn't capable of what I'd been accused of. April changed everything for me. She helped me remember who I was before everything got destroyed. Her family background was completely different from mine. She'd grown up in a stable household where parents actually communicated with their kids and worked through problems instead of choosing sides. When she talked about her childhood, it sounded like stories from a different planet. We got serious pretty quickly once I opened up to her. She was the first person besides Jensen who heard the whole story and immediately said, "That's completely insane that your family believed her over you." Having someone validate that it was crazy, that I wasn't overreacting or being dramatic, was huge for my mental health. When April brought me home to Vancouver to meet them, they welcomed me like I'd always been part of their family. Her dad taught me to fish on the Fraser River. Her mom shared family recipes that had been passed down for generations. And nobody questioned my past or made me feel like I had to prove myself. They just accepted that I was important to April, and that was enough for them. April's parents had been married for 30 years and still acted like they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. After about 2 years together, April got pregnant. Twins, which was both terrifying and amazing. We were having a boy and a girl, and I remember thinking that these kids would never know the pain of being abandoned by their family. When the kids were born, everything clicked into place. Holding my son and daughter for the first time, I knew I would literally die before letting anyone hurt them the way I had been hurt. These kids were going to grow up knowing their father would always believe them, always support them, always be on their side. The kids are 4 now, and they're everything to me. April's family stepped up in ways that blew my mind. Her parents moved to Montreal to be closer to the grandkids, taking early retirement to help us with childcare. Her dad helped me buy a house in a good neighborhood with decent schools, co-signing the mortgage when my credit history wasn't quite strong enough. Her mom basically moved in for the first month after the twins were born, doing laundry, cooking meals, and teaching April and me how to handle 2 babies at once. I got promoted to project manager at the construction company, which came with better pay and more flexible hours. The promotion meant I could spend more time with the kids while still advancing my career. April finished her nursing degree and got a job at the children's hospital, which was perfect because she could relate to what the families were going through. We were actually living a dream. Good jobs, nice house, healthy kids, supportive extended family. The kids grew up thinking they had one set of grandparents, and that was normal. I told April's parents the truth about my family, and they made it clear that as far as they were concerned, I was their son now. They took their grandparent duties seriously, showing up for every birthday party, school play, and soccer game. My kids called them Grandma and Grandpa and got spoiled rotten just like any other grandchildren. Jensen kept visiting, usually twice a year, and became like an uncle to the kids. They loved him, and he loved being able to spoil them and then give them back to us when they got cranky. He'd still update me on what was happening back home, though by now I mostly didn't want to know. Kai and Anita had gotten married in this big, expensive wedding that my parents had apparently paid for. They'd bought a house 3 streets over from where we grew up, close enough to my parents that Anita could continue her perfect daughter-in-law act. Kai was working at the same engineering firm where my dad had worked before retiring. It was like they were living the life I was supposed to have, with the woman who had destroyed my chance at having it. Jensen said my parents still never mentioned me or asked how I was doing. It was like I had never existed. They'd created this alternate reality where their son was Kai and their daughter-in-law was Anita, and I was just erased from the family history. Honestly, by that point, it didn't hurt as much as it used to. I had a family that actually cared about me. Kids who thought I was a hero for being able to fix their broken toys and make pancakes on Saturday mornings, and a life built on truth instead of lies. 8 years after everything fell apart, and 5 years of peaceful family life with April and the twins, the universe decided to test me again. It was a Saturday morning, and I was helping my son with his math homework while my daughter and April were at the grocery store. Just a normal weekend morning. The doorbell rang, and I figured it was probably a neighbor or delivery guy. My son ran to answer it before I could stop him. I heard him talking to someone but couldn't make out what was being said. Then he came running back looking confused. "Dad, there's an old man at the door who says he's your father." My stomach dropped. I walked to the front door, and there was my father, standing on my porch in Canada, looking older and more tired than I remembered, but definitely him. He was wearing a winter coat that looked expensive, but hung loose on his frame, like he'd lost weight recently. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. This man who had disowned me 8 years ago was somehow standing at my door like something out of a nightmare. "Hello, son," he said quietly. His voice was the same, but there was something broken in it. I slammed that door so hard the whole frame shook. All those old feelings of betrayal and anger came flooding back like it had happened yesterday. My hands were shaking, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. My dad kept knocking and calling my name, my old name, which sounded foreign after all these years. "Please, son, open that door and let me talk to you. I know you're angry, but please let me explain." The desperation in his voice was something I'd never heard before. But then April got home with our daughter, and she was asking who was that man at the door. I explained the situation as simply as I could. April had heard the whole story, obviously, but she'd never expected to actually meet any of my family. She was furious on my behalf, but she told me to take my time and see what he wanted while she'd keep the kids busy. She took them to their rooms and gave me space to deal with whatever this was. Then I opened the door and let my father in. He looked around the house, taking in the family photos on the walls, the kids' artwork on the refrigerator, the obvious signs of a happy family life. There were pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, school events, years of memories that he'd never been part of. "You've done well for yourself," he said, and there was genuine admiration in his voice. "No thanks to you," I replied. "What do you want?" He sat down heavily on my couch and suddenly looked every one of his 73 years. His hair had gone completely gray, and there were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I need to tell you something. Something we discovered last month." What my father told me next was both vindicating and infuriating at the same time. Apparently, Kai and Anita's marriage wasn't the fairy tale everyone thought it was. About 6 months ago, Kai had started noticing some weird behavior from Anita, being secretive with her phone, making excuses to go out alone, staying late at work for projects that never seemed to materialize. Kai decided to do some detective work before confronting her. He followed Anita one evening when she said she was going to her book club, only to see her car parked outside a restaurant downtown. He waited in his car for 3 hours until she came out with Alan, but he didn't confront them immediately. Instead, he started paying attention to everything: her schedule, her excuses, her behavior when she thought he wasn't watching. He started documenting the affair. He followed them for weeks, getting photos and video evidence of their relationship. Turns out she was still having an affair with Alan, who was now married with kids of his own. They'd been meeting at hotels, at Alan's office after hours. The affair had never really ended. They'd just gotten better at hiding it. But here's the part that made my blood boil. They'd been carrying on this affair for years. Not months, years. It had been going on since before I caught them the first time and continued through their entire marriage. Qley found credit card records showing regular hotel visits throughout their marriage, plus evidence that they'd been meeting even before the wedding. She'd been living a double life for basically their entire relationship. He'd also discovered text messages between them. What was in those messages was devastating. They'd been planning their future together, talking about leaving their respective spouses, even discussing what they'd do if anyone found out about their history. The kicker? During their marriage, Alan had gotten her pregnant, and she'd had an abortion without telling Qley, terrified it might not be his. The messages showed them laughing about how clueless Qley was and how easy it had been to fool everyone. In those messages, Anita was also terrified about the family finding out the truth about everything they had done. She was paranoid that I would somehow prove my innocence and expose their lies. They'd even discussed what they'd do if I ever came back and tried to tell people what really happened. When Qley finally confronted her with all the evidence, she broke down and confessed everything. She admitted that she and Alan had been involved before Qley, that they'd never really stopped seeing each other, and that when I caught them that day years ago, she panicked and made up the assault story to cover her tracks. She broke down completely and admitted to lying about everything. She'd married Qley while still in love with Alan. She'd let my family destroy me to protect her secret. And she'd been planning to leave Qley for Alan as soon as Alan's divorce was finalized, and they could be together openly. My father had discovered all this when Qley came to him for advice about the divorce. Qley was completely destroyed, asking how he could have been so blind, how he could have wasted years of his life on someone who never loved him, and how he had destroyed his relationship with his brother for a woman who had been lying about everything from the beginning. Qley is beside himself, my father said. He knows he destroyed his relationship with his brother for a cheater. He wants to call you, to apologize, but he doesn't even know how to find you. He's been asking everyone if they know where you went, but you just disappeared completely. I sat there trying to process all this information. 8 years too late, my family finally knew the truth. 8 years after they'd thrown me away like garbage, they'd finally figured out that I'd been telling the truth all along. The vindication felt hollow after so much time had passed. And what about you? I asked my father. What's your excuse for believing her over your own son? He looked down at his hands, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. I don't have one. We were wrong. Completely, utterly wrong. We let that girl manipulate us into destroying our own family, and we've spent years living with the consequences. Have you, though? I asked. Because from what Jensen tells me, you all seem pretty happy with your choice. You got your perfect daughter-in-law, your fairy tale wedding, your happy family. You just erased me from the picture and moved on like I never existed. We tried to, he admitted, but not a day went by that I didn't think about you. Wonder where you were, if you were okay, if you'd ever forgive us. Your mother. She's never been the same. She's been on antidepressants for years, crying every Christmas and birthday because her son isn't there. She keeps your old room exactly the same, like she's waiting for you to come home. Her son was there, I said. You just chose to believe I was a predator instead of listening to me. We talked for about 2 hours. He told me about how Qley's world had fallen apart when he learned the truth, how my mother had been devastated to discover what they'd done to an innocent son, how they'd all been trying to figure out how to find me and make amends. He said they'd hired a private investigator who eventually tracked me down in Montreal. I told him about my life, my wife, my kids, my career, my in-laws who treated me like family. I showed him pictures of his grandchildren that he'd never meet, told him about the family traditions we'd created, the life I'd built from nothing. I explained how April's parents had stepped into the grandparent role, and how my kids had never known they were missing anything. I want to make this right, he said. I know I can't undo what we did, but maybe we can find a way forward. Maybe we can be a family again. There is no way forward, I told him. You made your choice 8 years ago. You chose to believe a liar over your own son. You threw me away like I was nothing, and now you want me to just forgive and forget because you finally figured out the truth? I told him about the years of therapy, the trust issues, the complete destruction of my faith in family loyalty. I explained how I'd built a new life with people who actually cared about me, and how his sudden appearance had disrupted the peace I'd worked so hard to achieve. I talked about the nightmares I'd had for years, wondering if I really was the monster they thought I was. I'm sorry, he said, and he was crying now. I'm sorry for everything. We were terrible parents, and you deserved so much better. Your apology is too late, I said. I have a family now that chooses me every day, that believes in me, that would never throw me away for someone else's lies. You can take your guilt and your apologies and go back to whatever's left of the family you chose to protect. I walked him to the door and told him not to contact me again. He handed me a piece of paper with Kai's phone number on it, said Kai wanted to apologize too, and had been hoping to reconnect. I threw it in the trash without looking at it, making sure he saw me do it. After he left, I sat on my couch and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally, completely free. The truth was out, my family knew they'd been wrong, and I didn't care anymore. I had everything I needed right here in this house with my wife and kids, and the family that chose to love me. April came downstairs after putting the kids to bed and found me sitting there. "Are you okay? How do you feel?" she asked, sitting next to me and taking my hand. "Like I can finally close that chapter," I said. "They know the truth now, and it doesn't change anything. This is my family. You guys are my family, and that's enough." Jensen called later that night to check on me. Apparently, my father had contacted him to get my address, and Jensen had been debating whether to warn me or not. I told him what my father had said, and Jensen just laughed. "Took them long enough to figure it out," he said. "Too bad they lost you in the process." "Their loss," I said, and for the first time in 7 years, I really meant it. Edit. A lot of people are asking if I'm going to reconnect with Kai. The answer is no. He had 8 years to figure out the truth, or at least question Anita's story. Instead, he married her and lived happily ever after, while I rebuilt my life from nothing. Some bridges burn completely, and that's okay. Edit 2. For those asking about my kids, they know I'm from the States and that I have family there I don't talk to. When they're older, I'll tell them the whole story. Right now, they're just happy kids with parents who love them and grandparents who spoil them rotten. That's how I want to keep it.